and Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you might be. I'm trying to stream everywhere. Instagram, how you doing this evening? It's time for another quick and dirty live session. I'm gonna get this thing moving and not wait for people to chime in because I want to make sure that I get the information out, and I don't want to be here too long. So I'll start out the way that I always do by saying, well, I don't always start out this way, but I'm going to talk tonight about 3 tips for women in midlife. A lot of the times we say 40 plus, a lot of the times we say midlife. What we're often trying to indicate by saying those things is we're usually trying to indicate that these women may be in the early stages of perimenopause. If not, the latter stages of perimenopause is kind of sort of 2 stages of perimenopause, biologically speaking. Menopause, which is technically 1 day, and or postmenopause. So usually we say women in midlife, women over 40, because those are the common age range when these things start. However, could be as young as 35. So if, as I said in the announcement for this broadcast on Instagram, if you're finding that things aren't working quite the same way that they used to work in the context of your exercise and nutrition program, your overall wellness program, this might be good for you. And I want to preface the conversation with something else. As a cisgendered heterosexual male, I realize that I can never have this experience of perimenopause or postmenopause. As a coach that works almost exclusively with moms over 30, some of my clients are not moms, but all of my clients are women over 30. As a coach that works in that space, I have to be highly aware of deploying empathy, understanding my place here in this conversation, never, ever, ever getting even close to mansplaining, because ain't nobody got time for that. But also deploying some cultural humility because I cannot experience most of the things that I am intellectually aware and observant of. So I'm working for that space, and always the space of humility. I'm gonna pay the bills really, really quick because currently I'm enrolling no more than 6 moms over 30 who want to build their healthiest body, healthiest relationship with their body, and healthiest relationship with food. My enrollment ends on this Sunday. If that's you, DM me, message me the word interested. We'll take a look and see if you might be a good fit for the program. Let's get into the details of what I want to talk about tonight, though. I want to give the ladies out there 3 tips on the fitness side and 3 tips on the nutrition side that might help you better reach your goals, better feel a sense of health, uh, if you are in this sort of over 40, I may be perimenopausal, but I'm not sure, all the way to definitely postmenopausal spectrum, because you probably noticed that things have changed biologically for you, right? A couple of things that I hear from the women that are in this time of life who interact with me or ask me questions or hire me Instagram. I feel all of a sudden, Ren, overnight, I felt squishy, or ran all of a sudden overnight, I felt like all my muscle was gone, or I'm exhausted. Like, dude, exhausted, exhausted. Like the type of exhaustion, I'm getting good sleep, I'm getting to bed early, I'm eating regular, but I'm exhausted. Like, I cannot move from my couch or bed exhausted. And they also tell me things like, all of a sudden, the way that my body gains weight has changed, and it's not so much where it used to be, hips, thighs, or chest. It's more so like in my midsection. That's unusual for me, Ren. So these are the things that I'm thinking about as I approach this conversation. I'm going to give you 3 tips for nutrition for women in midlife, right? Perimenopause spectrum, all the way up through postmenopause, even if you're not there yet in either of the spectrum. And I'm going to give you 3 tips for exercise. So let's start with the nutrition tips first, because I think this is the more complex. And I think if I give you these nutrition tips, they're probably a little bit more immediately actionable. I realize that some of you out there may not be exercisers. So let's just start there. So, number one with nutrition, something that you're probably going to want to shift from the way you did things in your 20s and maybe early to mid 30s to the way that you might want to do things now is consider the fact that fasted training isn't really a great ally for you at this stage in your life. And oftentimes, what happens is with the women that I work with, the recent history that they've had is maybe they feel like things don't work the way that they used to in terms of their exercise. They don't get the results that they used to in terms of their nutrition. So they double down on what used to work. They figure, okay, if this exercise isn't getting me the results that I used to be able to get, or this nutritional protocol isn't getting me the results that I used to get, I'll just do both harder. Like the old mantra, move more, eat less, which really isn't that helpful. And you decide that you're going to move more and eat less, and that ultimately backfires. You're just growing more and more frustrated with the lack of results that you expect to get from what you've been doing. So a lot of that comes from the fact that probably in your 20s and maybe even now, even for women that are athletes, you started your day with training without eating, right? The fasted cardio, the fasted training. Now, one thing that's important to understand here is number one, without question, women do better in a fed state, right? Without question. Now, that doesn't mean that you like to eat breakfast and you feel good exercising on a full stomach, nor does it mean that you have to exercise on a full stomach. When I'm talking about doing fuel training, specifically in the morning, which seems to be the harder time to be fueled for your training. When I'm talking about that from the context of nutrition, I don't mean you need to sit down with a plate of bacon, eggs, some hash browns, waffles, and pancakes. That's not what I'm saying at all, because I understand that for most women, for most women that I've encountered as a coach over the last decade, you don't feel particularly great when you're exercising at the level of intensity that I know a lot of you like to exercise on a full stomach. Like, that's not a great feeling for you. It makes you a little nauseous. So we don't have to go that far. It can be as simple as a scoop of protein powder in in your morning latte if you like to do that. It could be as simple as a little canister of Greek yogurt. Maybe throw some fruit over the top of that Greek yogurt. It could be as simple as it could be one boiled egg or two boiled eggs, right? Just having something that's fueling you, because the research that we have on fasted training is research, like most research, that was developed by researching men. It wasn't until somewhere around 1993 that the National Institute of Health, NIH, uh, decided that we needed to mandate research for women in the context of exercise and nutrition. So everything up to that, there was no precedence set that we need to study how women's bodies work in the terms of exercise. We need to look at how women's bodies respond in terms of nutrition. 1993, I'm an old guy, I'm 49, so I know it was a long time ago, but it was college years for me. Um, but it wasn't that long ago, right? Sort of relatively speaking. So we need to be aware of that. The fact that a lot of the information that maybe even your trainer gives you is based on men's research, and men and women have sex differences. You're talking about an XY chromosome human versus an XX chromosome human, completely different reproductive systems and completely different responses because of those reproductive systems to things that the body encounters. So a lot of that research about fasted cardio, fasted training was done on men. Women, you have to be careful because your thyroid function can really downregulate after even just 4 days of under fueling and moving your body. So consider having some type of nourishment, some type of fuel before you exercise in the morning, and you will probably see that you get better results because you're going to be able to operate with a little bit more intensity in your exercise routine. And you'll probably see that you'll get better results throughout the course of the day. So you may want to make the shift from this thing that you used to do in your 20s and probably your 30s, the fasted morning exercise. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to eat an entire big breakfast from the local Cracker Barrel, right? That's not what I'm saying. But getting some fuel before you exercise will drive your exercise a little bit better. And it'll also better prepare your body for an adaptive response after the exercise routine. You're working with a certain amount of intensity. We have to realize that once your energy, carbohydrate energy, gets depleted from your muscles, you hit the wall faster, right? And that those carbs are they're broken down to something called glycogen. It's one of your muscles' favorite energy source, right? And just 2 or 3 hours of low intensity steady state cardio will deplete that glycogen, but 15 to 30 minutes of intense training will deplete it. And once that liver glycogen storage goes down, again, you're going to find yourself hitting the wall and subsequently hitting that same wall throughout the course of the day because you just weren't really that fueled for your exercise. So that's nutrition point number one that you may want to shift once you get into midlife and you're exercising from what you used to do in your 20s and 30s to what you do now. Shift number two. So we got to look at protein. Mm, thank you, Spider Man. We got to look at protein because at this stage in your life, as estrogen starts to loop de loop, estrogen and progesterone start to withdraw as you get into that perimenopausal phase. Um, your body's having a harder time holding on to muscle. Something that we call sarcopenia, age related muscle loss. It accelerates when you get into this stage of life, particularly perimenopausal. We'll say when you get over 40, that rate of muscle loss increases, but so too, your rate of being able to absorb protein decreases. So it's harder for your body to absorb protein from the protein sources that you eat. And these sources, they can be animal based protein, but it can very well be plant based protein. It could be stuff like tofu or edamame or beans and legumes, especially. You need that protein throughout the day because it's going to help balance out your blood sugar. And when that blood sugar fluctuates throughout the course of the day, it stresses your body, increases a cortisol release, stress hormone, and cortisol predisposes you to all types of things. But you need protein to maintain your muscle mass. Again, if you're not getting enough protein to repair and restore your muscles, your body's probably going to use carbohydrates to help repair and restore those muscles. And when the carbohydrates get depleted from your muscles, again, you're hitting that wall. This is why a lot of my clients in this phase will come to me and say, I'm perpetually fatigued. I am super fatigued all the time, right? It's because if you're doing the work of the exercise training and you're not prioritizing protein, your body is going to take up some other mechanisms to make sure that those muscles get fed. So, in terms of protein, you want to make sure that you get a little bit before your workout, maybe 15 grams, maybe less, but primarily after your workout, 30, 35, 40 minutes after you train, your body station. That means it wants to change in the way that the exercise that you've done changes a body, whether that be body fat reduction, whether that be muscle gain or muscle maintenance. Your body is ripe for adaptation at that point. This is the time during the course of your day when you want to get the biggest one shot dose of protein. I'm talking 30 to 40 grams of protein. And that doesn't have to be primarily from animal based sources, it could be plant based sources or a combination. You could very well have some salmon or some, uh, chicken, your choice of protein source, and some beans or legumes with it. That way you get about 20, 25 grams of protein from the animal source and get 10, 15 grams of protein from the plant-based source. Absolutely okay. But you definitely need to prioritize protein after your workout. And maybe in your 20s and 30s, you didn't need to do that because the body was much more inclined to uptake protein and much more inclined to help you preserve that muscle. And this is crucial because When that muscle gets depleted, when you get into that stage of sarcopenia where you're having a hard time maintaining muscle, we know it's going to affect your metabolism, and you don't want that, right? And seriously, you want to slow down the rate at which your body is predisposed to wasting away or losing muscle generally, because every ounce of muscle that you have on your bodies, ladies, is a declaration of your long term independence, your long term joy, your long term ability to do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. When you call on your body, it's going to respond, but not if you wasted away that muscle. So, your second dietary change that you probably want to make at this stage of your life, 40 plus, you've got to prioritize that protein throughout the course of the day. I said this Wednesday night on a live broadcast, but protein isn't stored in the body. You can't just get a lot of it at one point in the day and then just have it all day waiting for you. When your body doesn't use it at that particular time, when you take some in, it goes away. I always use the analogy of pouring a big mop bucket into a sink that's not stopped up. It'll fill up for a little while, but then it's going to drain. That's what the amino acid pools in your cells. Amino acids are just the broken down version of protein. That's what the amino acid pools in your cells do. So it's very important that you're getting protein throughout the day. If you can, generally 25 or so grams at each meal, generally 10 to 15 grams at each snack that you might have throughout the day, because again, you can't store it up and use it all for the rest of the day. You've got to put it in place. It increments throughout the day, more appropriately, even increments throughout the day, so that your body can regulate that blood sugar, so that your muscles can get the repair and restoration that they need, so you can maintain that better, more efficient metabolism that you want. Protein is really very important. And again, it doesn't have to be plant-based protein. I mean, animal-based protein. It could be plant-based, but we're definitely not talking about 5 protein bars throughout the course of the day. We're definitely not talking about 5 protein shakes throughout the course of the day. There is a place in the day for supplementation, but we want to be able to get it as best we can from real food sources. That protein is important. The third thing you want to change nutritionally in midlife that you probably did not do in your 20s and 30s is you want to eat frequently throughout the course of the day. If you're not familiar with low energy availability, which is the phenomenon that occurs when you are underfueled and also training regularly, LEA for short. You can Google low energy availability. Dr. Stacy Sims, StacySims, Stacy T. Sims, as a matter of fact. Dr. Stacy Sims has great podcasts that she's been on talking about low energy availability. I learned the details of it through her course that I've taken, Menopause 2.0. But the information's out there for low energy availability and what happens when you're chronically underfueled and chronically overtrained, more so underfueled, is your body begins to be predisposed to storing fat and losing muscle. Horrible combination of events. Nobody wants that. You've probably, at some point in your life, been on a diet, had some dietary protocol. Totally get that. As your hormonal profile changes and you get into your 40s, these things are not beneficial. That methodology is not beneficial for you. Realistically, most women who are exercising regularly and intensely probably need 2,000 calories per day. And I know that sounds crazy if you're out there listening. And again, if what you're doing now is working well for you, this conversation isn't for you. You keep doing the thing that's got you on the winning team, right? I'm not here to convince anybody to change. I'm just here to present the science as I understand it, based on the general research of this science and how we understand it as an industry. I'm just here to give you the truth. I'm not here to make any decisions for you. I'm just here to give you information so that the decision you make is informed. But you need to eat throughout the course of the day. What typically happens with most women is the first meal is a drink of the day. There's a lot of A lot of you out there that think that coffee's a meal, it's not. Spoiler alert, it's not a meal. Or there's a workout, a fasted workout, which again, I do not advise. And then there's a big, huge shake, right? Big, huge protein shake. And then there's no eating until dinner, right? Most women who are busy, and I get it, managing a household, managing some type of occupation, will eat early in the day, basically eat nothing through the day, and they're bookending their day with nutrition. But you need nutrition the entire day. You need all day nutrition to stay out of that space where you have low energy availability. One thing to consider for by the science is that for men can get away with eating about 15, 15 calories daily per kilogram of body weight. And if you want to know what the kilograms are, it's just your kgs, right? So for men, typically they can have normal function eating 15, 16 calories per kilogram actually of lean body mass. But for women, that number is much higher. Women need about 35, even 40 calories per kilogram of lean body mass. So when you operate under that, it only takes 4 days for you start to have disrupted thyroid function. And again, this isn't something that you want. So stay away from low energy availability. Find your best method for eating throughout the entire day. Track it. You don't have to specifically track the calories, although if you have questions about how many calories, if you have questions about macronutrients, feel free to inbox me. I'll answer your questions. I'll get a little information from you, and we can talk specifically about how much carbohydrate you need at what point during the course of the day. But you want to make sure that you're prioritizing protein and carbohydrates pre-workout and post-workout. And post-workout, within 30, 40 minutes, you want the largest amount of protein, 30 to 40 grams of protein right in that window. And I know we talk about for those of you out there that are uh, fitness enthusiasts and follow a lot of stuff on Instagram or Facebook or what have you, or read magazines in the past, you probably heard about the myth of the anabolic window, right? A lot of people, a lot of men on the internet and saying, there is no anabolic window. It doesn't matter. You don't have to get nutrients in within 30 minutes of exercise or within an hour of exercise. And that's correct for men. For women in the perimenopause, menopause to postmenopause spectrum, you absolutely do need to get that nutrient dense feeding in within 30 minutes, maybe an hour at best, of the workout, because of the fact that the body is ready and ripe for adaptation at that point. Nutrient timing is a thing for women, particularly women over 40, the midlife woman. If you want to make the best of your exercise routine, make sure you have just a little fuel before, but definitely make sure you're getting quality amount of protein after. And again, if you're not doing any of this and you're living your best life, you keep doing what you're doing. Don't let me disrupt you. I'm not here to upset you. I just want to give you some solutions based on the evidence, the research, but research that's based on women, as I understand it at the moment, particularly for the 40 and up crowd who have a tendency to feel so much confusion for the way that their body shifts due to hormones, and so much frustration about doubling down on things that used to work and finding that they just don't seem to work anymore. So those are the three nutrition tips that I want to give you. Things that you probably want to change from the way you did it in your 20s and early to mid 30s to the way that's probably going to be most appropriate for you now to get you the results that you want from all that work you're doing. Because if you're going to do all that work, you might as well get a result from it, right? So let's shift to the training really quickly. Three quick tips about the training and the methodologies that you may want to shift in your training to better take advantage of what your hormonal profile is now, right? Now what it used to be like. And the first one is strength training. If you're not strength training now, you definitely want to start in reading Dr. Stacy Sims' book Next Level, which is about menopause and athleticism, in reading Amanda Thieves' book Menopocalypse, in reading Dr. Jen Gunter's book Menopause Manifesto, and in taking coursework through MedFit, menopause coaching specialist certification that I'm working on. Um, Strength training is the bee's knees. It's all the sauce. It's everything that you want to do with your body, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're looking at things like age-related muscle loss. I mentioned that earlier, sarcopenia. We're also looking at things like age-related bone loss, osteopenia. We're looking at situations where it's more difficult to hang on to the muscle and more difficult to uptake the protein to regenerate muscle, right? We're looking at situations where the body isn't as efficient at burning body fat. So we want to do everything we can to maintain that healthier metabolism. Strength training is going to do that. In particular, we've got to get to a heavier strength training. So, sort of gone are the days where you're doing sort of that hypertrophy training, that 12 to 15 repetitions. Gone are the days when you're doing sort of like the body pump class where you've got a relatively moderate amount of weight, but hopping around with it, that sweaty session. Here are the days where we want to prioritize heavier lifts, compound movements, 3 to 5 repetitions per set. So we're looking at a 3 by 5 model here. Um, to the extent that you can do it and you have the equipment available, some strength training is better than none, right? So I want to put that out there because just because of the fact that I'm going to try to give you the information that I understand at this point to be scientifically optimal, it doesn't mean that there isn't a spectrum from zero to something better to something better to optimal. So I never want you to get hung up on the fact of, well, I don't have access to exactly what you said, so I'm not going to do anything. I want you to understand that there's always a spectrum. And if we can get a little better, 1% better, it's still worth your time. So let me throw that disclaimer out there. That's important to understand. But we want heavy strength training. A 3 by 5 protocol is really conducive. So we're looking at 3 to 5 exercises in your workout, 3 to 5 sets of those exercises, 3 to 5, excuse me, 3 to 5 repetitions of those exercises, and resting 3 to 5 minutes in between. Now, here's the reason why. And I don't want to get too sciencey, but as estrogen starts to withdraw, right? Estradiol specifically, E2. As E2 starts to withdraw, as you're going through the early stages of perimenopause, into menopause, and the post, um, estrogen is responsible for helping your body produce a strong muscle contraction. There's a couple called actin and myosin in the muscle, right? And a crude explanation of actin and myosin is that they get together so that, right? They act on each other, and they are acting on behalf of the signals sent by estrogen. As estrogen withdraws, that zipper doesn't zip the way it needs to zip, and you don't get as many great contractions as you used to, because estrogen affects pretty much every system in a woman's body. It's like a women's super soldier serum, right? So that zipping and that tightening, that good contraction of the muscle, doesn't happen at lower weights like it used to. So we shift over to more of a power protocol, more of a power strength training protocol. We're lifting heavier weight, much heavier weight for lesser repetitions, right? So we can act on that muscle in a way that when we feed it that protein later, we're able to maintain that lean mass, that toned look that everyone wants. This is one of the reasons why that toned look has a tendency to slip away past 40. So you've got to be mindful of that. Think about your body as a television set. You guys remember TV before remote controls? I'm old enough to remember that. You probably do too. At one point in my house, I was the remote control. If somebody would yell from the living room for me to come in there and turn the television channel. But think about your body as a television set. Mm. Oh, that's good, Spider Man. Think about your body as a television set. Think about the remote control as your workout, your nutrition, your program. Your program is a remote control, the program that you came up with, or the program that your coach gave you. Um, and think about the hormones, estrogen specifically in this case. Think about that as the batteries, right? Your remote control has two double estrogen batteries, right? So when those batteries are no longer working in the remote control, you can push the right buttons, right? You're doing the right program, push the right buttons, and what happens to the TV? Nothing. Excuse me. The channel doesn't change, right? The volume doesn't go up and down. Nothing wrong with the TV, nothing wrong with the remote control, nothing wrong with your program. But the method of communicating what you're doing to your body isn't there anymore, because estrogen was the batteries. So now you got to get up and change the channel yourself, right? So the muscle contraction that you used to get from estrogen acting on actin and myosin to zip the muscle up and contract it, we can't depend on that anymore. So we got to get up and we got to change the channel manually. And manually changing the channel to get a better muscle contraction is lifting heavier than you probably used to, for less repetitions than you probably used to, and resting for longer than you probably used to. And you're not resting because you're huffing and puffing and you're tired. It's not the same as doing high intensity training. It's not because you're sweaty and exhausted. You're resting because your central nervous system needs enough time to recover from the processing of all those mechanoreceptors, the processing of that heavy lift. Your central nervous system is working overtime to control that heavier weight and really, really create a big push. That's why you're resting. So oftentimes my go-getter clients, they'll say, well, why am I resting so long? I'm not even tired. Or I feel stupid resting this long. I'm not even tired. You're resting in that way because your central nervous system needs to recover so it can handle the next big lift. And again, we're looking at 3 to 5 exercises, 3 to 5 sets of those exercises, 3 to 5 repetitions, resting 3 to 5 minutes, lifting heavy weight, maybe 80% of what we call your 1 rep max and above. You're as it's described in the book Next Level by Dr. Stacey Sims, and as you know, informed women who are coaches, hear colleagues of mine say, you're lifting heavy shit, right? You need to lift heavy shit. The second thing that you want to change in terms of your exercise protocol, shifting from what you used to do in your 20s and 30s to what you're going to be doing now in your 40s as you're making that transition through perimenopause to menopause, technically one day, to postmenopause the rest of your life, is you want to polarize your cardiovascular conditioning. And what I mean by polarize is it needs to be on extremes, like politicians are, right? Um, you want it to be on extremes and you want to stay away from the middle, nothing moderate. And when I say moderate, and I'm going to get hate mail for this, don't at me. When I say moderate, I mean you're staying away from sort of that F45, Orange Theory Fitness, sweaty boot camp session stuff, the stuff that's not quite intense enough to move the needle for what estrogen no longer does, but also not easy enough to not exhaust you, right? It just saps your strength. So you're looking at either doing things like sprint interval training, and I'll explain that in a minute, or you're looking at doing things like a nice, easy, steady paced run, walk, swim, cycle, Tai Chi, yoga, just a relaxing, almost embarrassingly slow paced, steady state, long bout of cardio versus a very, very short, highly intense type of cardio. So if you're looking at sprint interval training, what we mean by that is an interval training protocol where you go what we call supra maximal for a short period of time. Supra maximal is just as hard as you can go, right? As fast as you can, like your life depending on the speed. You do maybe 20 seconds of very, very high speed, as fast as you can go on an exercise bike, for instance. Following that with a minute and 30, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 2 minutes and 30 of a very, very, very easy pace. You want the high interval to be hard enough that you could not do it more than 30 seconds. If you could go at that speed for more than 30 seconds, it's not sprint interval training, right? Your body's energy sources start to collapse around 20 or 30 seconds. You're going as fast as you possibly can, but you need the lower phase to be low enough to fully recover for the next cycle of that intense training. So again, 30 minutes tops. That's including a 5 minute warm up and a 5 minute cool down. Fundamentally, for the interval portions of the training, as you add the high intensity portion to the low intensity, you're not really doing more than 20 minutes, right? Again, anything more than that, the intensity is going to drop because you're not a machine, you're not a Terminator. And we slip into that moderate cardio that doesn't really serve you. So, whether it's sprint interval training or a true hit session, high intensity interval training, again, if it's 45 minutes of hit, it's not hit. If it's an hour of hit, it's not hit. It's 30 minutes or less, probably 20 minutes of the actual exercise. Again, you are going as hard as you possibly can for a very, very short period of time, and then going very easy for a longer period of time. A few things that are fundamentally helpful when you're doing sprint interval training or high intensity interval training in the manner I described it. Number one, you're going to get you'll have a better result of reducing visceral fat. Now, this is the abdominal, the intra-abdominal fat. This is the fat between your organs, the more dangerous kind, as opposed to what we call subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that's on my cheeks. That's subcutaneous. It's right under the skin. I can see it. The the visceral fat is behind the lining of the abdomen, in between the organs, and is particularly dangerous. Sprint interval training, high intensity interval training, great at reducing that. But it's also really good for overall body fat reduction. Sprint interval training. It's also very good for insulin sensitivity, because when you start to lose insulin sensitivity, we get into situations where a lot of what you eat is going to probably be predominantly sent over as body fat. So, insulin sensitivity, reduction of visceral fat, reduction of overall body fat, also something called BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And that's your brain cognition, because another thing that we know about this perimenopausal state, the 40 and above state, is the brain fog. Oh my gosh, I have so many women describe the brain fog to me. You go into the room to get something, you get in the room, you don't know why you're in the room, right? You're talking to someone, you know who they are, can't remember their name, right? Someone asks you about something that happened, you have no recollection of that thing ever at all in life. That's the brain fog, and it's because we're having an issue with BDNF. This sprint interval training helps to attenuate that. There's a few epigenetic responses that we get from that. On the other side of the cardiovascular conditioning, the other polarized end, the other pole, is we're going really easy with our cardiovascular conditioning. It's not to get a sweat, it's for the pure joy. A long run, easy pace for the pure joy. A long ride, easy pace for the pure joy. A long swim, easy swim for the pure joy, right? The second shift that you want to make in your training as you approach this time in your life, based on excuse me, based on the changes due to withdrawal of estrogen, estradiol specifically, and progesterone, is polarizing your cardiovascular training. You want to stay out of that middle session, the sweaty session. A lot of you, again, as you may find yourself frustrated with your results, you may find yourself doubling down on that type of cardio. I've had loads of women that are in this phase of life tell me how they love to go to Orange Theory Fitness or F45 or do boot camps, and they just keep going and they keep coming away dissatisfied with the results. It's not because you're not working hard enough. It's certainly not the blame of F45 Orange Theory Fitness. It's just the fact that at this point in your hormonal profile, the hormone that you need to communicate those things to get you your result is no longer as present or prevalent as it was. That's the second training tip. The third training tip is you got to balance out the hard with the easy, right? Probably past the point of 7 days a week or 6 days a week of the same intensity level of training. Rest, recuperation, and recovery become vitally important at this stage of your life. You just can't get around it. And again, cisgendered heterosexual male, but even I can't get around the fact that testosterone is withdrawing, right? I'm getting older. I'm 49 years old. So I find that if I do not prioritize sleep and rest, my workouts are shit. Like they're just not good. And my recovery's not good and my results aren't good. So there's sort of two ways you can look at scheduling out your exercise. Some people like the split of hard, easy, hard, easy, hard, easy. Some people like the hard section in a block and then subsequently easy sections. So, for example, Monday could be a full rest day. You just don't exercise at all on Monday. Tuesday, you might do lift heavy shit and a sprint interval training at some other point during the day, right? Wednesday, if you're doing every other day, Wednesday, that might be some yoga or a nice, easy paced walk or run. Thursday, you might be back to a sprint interval training and just that. Maybe you only have time for just that. Friday, you going nice and easy with some yoga, some Tai Chi, again, nice, easy cycle, something like that. Saturday, you're back to lifting heavy shit. And Sunday, you can have another rest day or an easier cardio. So, what I usually advise is somewhere between 2 and 3 strength training sessions per week, and somewhere between 1 and 2 sprint interval training or HIIT training per week. And then the rest of the days would be like your active rest of sorts, because we also know that in perimenopause to menopause state, we don't see that women do particularly well with a full rest day, not as well as you might think from like 20s and 30s. And it's often more beneficial to have sort of an active rest day most of the time and maybe one complete rest day. But that's the third thing that you might want to consider. So there you have it, quick and dirty live session. 3 tips for nutrition that you might want to shift from what you did in your 20s and 30s to what probably worked better for you now in your 40s and beyond. And then 3 exercise techniques, 3 training techniques that you may want to shift away from what you primarily did in your 20s and 30s to where you are now in your 40s and beyond, working with your body, working with your hormonal profile, because menopause isn't a deficiency. It's not a disease. It's not an illness. It's a natural transition of hormones, of your hormonal profile, right? But you can work with it to get the best result if you just sort of retool your thoughts about what your methodology should be. To pay the bills one more time really quickly, currently enrolling 6 moms over 30, excuse me, who want to build their healthiest relationship with their bodies, their healthiest relationship with food over the course of the next 12 weeks. DM me the word interested if that's you. Enrollment ends on Sunday. And until next time, let's keep it simple.